So, you watched the video about being tired of existing. Maybe you cried, maybe you didn't feel anything. Either way, you're still here. And the resting may have helped, or at least it stopped the bleeding for a while. But here you are, the next morning. Or the morning after that, and the same apartment is there, the same inbox, the same quiet dread sitting in the chest before your feet even hit the floor. The rest was real, the rest mattered. But rest alone can't restructure a life. So today, carefully, slowly, we're going to talk about what comes next. The last conversation we had was about permission. Permission to be exhausted. Permission to stop pretending you're fine. Permission to put down the performance of being a functional, thriving person, even for a little while. And that was real. That permission is still valid. But here's the thing no one tells you. When you finally admit how depleted you are, the life that exhausted you hasn't changed. It's still out there, waiting. The bills don't pause because your nervous system collapsed. The responsibilities don't dissolve because you needed to stop pretending. So there's this gap between I finally admitted I'm not okay and I have no idea how to build something better. This video lives in that gap. What we're going to do today isn't a 5-step plan to fix your life. I want to be really clear about that. Because you're tired, and 5-step plans require energy you don't have. What we're going to do instead is look at the structure underneath the exhaustion. We're going to ask, why is this so heavy? And then very carefully start making it lighter. Here's the reframe I want to offer you, and I'm going to ask you to sit with it, rather than immediately accept or reject it. Existential fatigue is not a sign that you're broken. It's a signal, a very loud, very painful signal, that the operating system you've been running your life on has completely failed. Not you, the system, the goals you inherited, the timelines you absorbed, the definition of a good life that was handed to you before you were old enough to consent to it. That system failed, and that means, and I say this carefully, you actually have the rare, uncomfortable gift of getting to build a different one. That's terrifying. It's also the only way through. There's a school of psychology called acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, and at its core, it makes one distinction that I think can genuinely change the texture of daily life. The distinction between goals and values. Now, these sound similar, they're not. Goals are destinations. They're binary, you either reach them or you don't. Get the promotion, buy the house, hit the milestone, find the relationship, lose the weight, build the business. And goals aren't inherently bad. But here's the problem for someone who's already exhausted. Goals require performance. They require you to hold a future version of yourself in your head and spend your present energy trying to become it. And when you cross one off, the relief lasts maybe a day, maybe a week, and then there's a new goal, another performance, another version of yourself you're not quite yet. This cycle, working hard, achieving, feeling nothing, has a name in psychology: hedonic adaptation. And for someone already running on empty, it becomes something closer to learned helplessness. You stop believing that effort will ever produce real relief. Values are different. Values aren't destinations, they're directions. A goal is get fit by June. A value is move my body in ways that feel like care, not punishment. A goal is be more productive. A value is bring my full attention to whatever I'm doing right now. A goal is find my passion. A value is stay curious, follow what's interesting. Here's why this matters when you're exhausted. You can live a value in 5 seconds. You don't need to succeed at it. You don't need energy reserves. You don't need to perform. If one of your values is kindness, you can live that value in a single interaction with a cashier, not a grand gesture, not a life overhaul, just a moment of patience, a genuine thank you, eye contact instead of a screen. That counts. It always counts. Let me give you a concrete example. Say you've been telling yourself you need to get healthy. That's a goal. And it's exhausting because get healthy has 100 sub-goals attached to it. Gym memberships, meal prep, tracking apps. It starts to feel like a second job on top of a life you're already barely surviving. Now replace that goal with a value: care for my body. What does care for my body look like on a day when you have nothing left? Maybe it's drinking one extra glass of water. Maybe it's choosing to walk to the corner instead of driving. Maybe it's going to bed 20 minutes earlier than usual. None of those things are Instagram content. None of them will get you a transformation story, but they are real. They are aligned with a direction you chose. And on a day when survival is the ceiling, they are enough. One of the quieter sources of existential exhaustion, the one that's hardest to name, is the sheer weight of the script you're running. Not your script, a borrowed one. From the time we're children, we absorb a definition of what a successful, good, acceptable life looks like. From parents, from culture, from comparison, from every metric that was handed to us before we were old enough to question it. And for a lot of people sitting with existential fatigue, a significant portion of their daily energy isn't going toward living their own life. It's going toward managing other people's emotional comfort. Do this honestly. Think about your last week. How much of what you did was genuinely for you? And how much of it was to prevent someone else from feeling disappointed, uncomfortable, worried? The fawn response, appeasing others to feel safe, is exhausting in a way that's very hard to explain to people who don't experience it, because it looks fine from the outside. You show up, you smile, you manage, but internally you're doing a continuous calculation. What does this person need from me right now? How do I present myself so they don't worry or judge or leave? That calculation costs energy every single day, and it's energy that's coming from somewhere. I'm not asking you to become someone who stops caring about other people. That's not what this is. I'm asking you to try something smaller, something I call the no performance protocol. The premise is simple. You stop performing wellness you don't feel, not to be difficult, not to make people uncomfortable, just to stop spending energy on a lie. Here's what that looks like in practice. When someone asks, "How are you?" and you feel the automatic pull toward, "I'm great, thanks," try something like this instead. Running on low battery today, but managing. Or, tired, honestly, but I'm here. Or, if the relationship allows it, not my best week, but I'm working through it. Notice what those responses do. They're not dramatic. They're not a cry for help. They don't make the other person responsible for fixing you, but they also don't cost you the energy of the lie. And over time, consistently refusing to perform wellness you don't feel, you stop training the people around you to expect that performance. Some people won't like it. That's information. The other part of the no performance protocol is quieter and harder. It's noticing the obligations on your calendar or your to-do list that are there entirely to manage someone else's feelings, not legal obligations, not things that matter. The social performances, the appearances, the maintenance of an image you never actually agreed to maintain. You don't have to detonate them all at once. Just notice which ones are yours, and which ones belong to a script you inherited. I want to talk about something that rarely gets addressed honestly, the possibility that you've tried to feel better, and it didn't work. Maybe you went back to old hobbies. Maybe you tried to get outside more. Maybe you watched videos about finding your passion, or journaled dutifully for 2 weeks, and felt nothing. Or worse, you felt guilty for feeling nothing, which added another layer of exhaustion to the pile. That experience has a name. It's called Anhedonia, the reduced ability to feel pleasure, and it is not a character flaw. It is a physiological state. A chronically stressed, depleted nervous system actually has a reduced capacity to produce and receive dopamine. You cannot willpower your way out of anhedonia. You cannot force a fried brain to suddenly enjoy things it used to enjoy. So here's the reframe. Stop chasing joy. For now, stop chasing pleasure, passion, meaning, spark. Those words carry too much pressure for a nervous system that's already overwhelmed. Instead, chase neutrality. Chase the absence of friction. Chase moments where nothing is being demanded from you. I call these micro-presences. A micro-presence is a moment of sensory contact with the present. Nothing asked, nothing performed. Let me give you 3 very specific examples, and I want you to notice how small they are, how nothing is required from you, except to let your senses do what they already do. 1. Find a bench somewhere outside. Not a scenic overlook, not a meaningful place, just a bench, and watch whatever birds happen to be nearby. Don't try to identify them. Don't think about what the moment means. Just watch the way they move, the small jerky pivots of a pigeon, the specific way a sparrow decides to leave. Your brain was built to do this. It's been doing it for 100,000 years. Let it do it for 3 minutes. 2. When it rains, or if you have a recording of rain, put down the screen. Don't multitask. Don't relax while scrolling. Just sit with the texture of it. The way rain has layers, the close drips and the far wash of it, the particular quality of the light. Your nervous system is not designed for screens. It is designed for rain. 3. The next time you shower, spend 60 seconds, just 60, paying attention only to the physical sensation of hot water, where it hits, how the temperature registers, the weight of it, not the day ahead, not the conversation you're dreading, just the water. These aren't meditation practices. They're not productivity hacks. They're not going to solve anything. But here's what they do. They give your nervous system brief moments of input it was designed to receive, instead of the constant high-intensity signal overload of modern survival. Neurologically, chronic stress shrinks the capacity of the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making, emotional regulation, and yes, the experience of pleasure. Micropresences aren't magic, but consistent, low-stakes sensory contact with the present has been shown to gently restore that capacity over time. Not in a week, not in a month, maybe, but the direction is repair, and that's where we're headed. I want to close with something honest. You are not going to have a lightning bolt epiphany. You are not going to wake up one morning with sudden clarity about your purpose, deep gratitude for your existence, and a renewed love for everything that exhausted you. That's not how this works. And anyone who tells you that's how this works is selling you something. What rebuilding actually looks like is quieter and messier and slower. It looks like identifying one value, just one, that feels genuinely yours. It looks like removing one performance from your week that was costing you energy and belonging to someone else's script. It looks like sitting on a bench and watching birds and not needing it to mean anything and letting your nervous system exhale for 3 minutes. None of that sounds like a transformation, but that's what a foundation looks like before anything is built on it. Here's the only thing I'm asking you to hold on to from today. You don't have to love your life right now to build a version of it that is easier to carry. Lower the bar. Not forever, just for now. The bar that says you need to be thriving, performing, grateful, productive. Lower it. Choose one direction, not a destination, a direction, something that feels like yours. And when the borrowed script starts playing again, When the performance demands start accumulating, notice them. You don't have to fight them all at once. Just notice. The work of rebuilding a life isn't dramatic. It happens in small, unsexy, unremarkable moments. It happens in the values you live for 5 seconds, the performances you quietly stop giving, the 3 minutes of water, or birds, or rain, that you give back to your nervous system. You are in the under construction phase. That means things are going to look like a mess for a while. That's normal. That's what construction looks like. You don't have to be done. You just have to be moving even slightly, in a direction that belongs to you. That's enough for today. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.